Coach Gard, this, I think I can safely say, is your brainchild. You brought this up several years ago. You thought, how cool would it be if we could celebrate all the eras of Wisconsin basketball? And thanks to you, we get to do that. Just take us through your thought process, why you wanted to celebrate Wisconsin basketball the way we are this weekend.
Well, I think, is this on? Are we good?
It is on.
Okay. Good, because they couldn't hear what we were talking about back behind the curtain. Coach Bennett gave us a few stories that can't be repeated. But anyway,
it's okay, Ann.
I think we didn't know. Yeah, Ann, it was all good. We didn't know. I didn't realize this was going to be the 125th season, but I think after I took over when Coach Ryan retired, you see the scope of the magnitude of this program and across generations. And obviously I've had former players that are or have been assistants with me. And just watching alumni come back and seeing the different generations, from the 60s, 70s, all the way to the current teams, that I really felt it was important growing up in the state and being from Wisconsin, that if there was a way we can continue to bridge everybody together, regardless of who you played for, when you were here, whether you hung a banner, whether you didn't make a tournament, how can we continue to build and really magnify the power of this program? So I think it's a credit to everybody. As Tyler mentioned, it's the donors, it's our boosters that are in here tonight, it's our former staff members, it's our former players. This is extremely special. I don't know if I would ever have envisioned it to be this unique and this special. So it's a thanks to everybody, and I convinced the three guys to my right here to make sure you were back for this weekend, and they all obliged on the first phone call. So no, you're not getting paid, Bo. You don't have any. There's no NIL for you.
I tried.
So, but no, I just extremely grateful for everybody.
This is the first time this today that we've had these four coaches in the same room, and it's take a look here. I mean, this is a lot of Wisconsin basketball history. I would tell you that Coach Steve Yoder wanted to be here. He's unable to be here this weekend. Likewise with Stan Van Gundy. Obviously, he's busy with Turner in the NBA playoffs. They both send their best, and they wish they could be here, but are unable. And also Brad Soderberg. As a matter of fact, we'll point your attention, if you can, you might strain your neck a little bit. Brad did put out a video. Let's take a look at it.
Hope you're doing well. I can't tell you how sorry I am not to be able to attend this weekend's festivities. I'd like to give you a little anecdote to give you an idea of why I'm not there. My first job as a college basketball coach was for a gentleman named Bill Morse at Fort Hays State University. At the end of our season, I told him I wanted to go back to visit my mom and dad, and he said the season is not over until next year's roster is secure. That being said, we still have 5 scholarships yet to fill here at UVA for this coming season. So I can't leave quite yet. In fact, we have 2 kids on campus this weekend. So Gardo, if you don't have your roster filled, get your assistants out of here and get them in the office. Secondly, I just want to make a couple of thank yous. First of all, I want to thank the 2000-2001 Badger team. That group of guys was the team that I had as an interim head coach. They had a target on their back, having been to the previous year's Final Four. We got back to the NCAA tournament and lost to Georgia State in Spokane, if you all remember. We faced a box and one, and I was too stupid to know what to do. So that's a team that could have gone a lot further had they had a better coach. And then, of course, I want to thank the Bennetts. The opportunity that Tony's given me here at Virginia has been absolutely unbelievable. I think, though I'm very biased, I think he's a first ballot Hall of Famer when he decides to finish coaching. And it has been an absolute pleasure for me to be by his side these 8 years at Virginia. And then lastly, and even more importantly than Tony, I want to thank Dick Bennett. I've said often to people, aside from my mom and dad, no one has had a bigger impact on my life than Coach. And way back to UW-Stevens Point, when I was a high school player at Pacelli, and I wanted to come to Point, and he said, no, you can go play somewhere else. I got 2 point guards, and that's vintage Dick Bennett. And 2 years later, I did transfer back, and that was the start of a great and long relationship. And I can tell you something, Coach, the day you called me to join you as a Badger assistant was one of the greatest memories of my life. I'll never forget it. For a Wisconsin boy that wasn't good enough to be a Badger as a player, what a thrill, what an honor to spend 6 years on the Wisconsin bench. One of my most prized possessions is right here with me in the office, and it's my signed Badger basketball from the team that went to the Final Four in 2000, a memory that I will never forget. I will always be a Wisconsin Badger. I'm so sorry I couldn't make it. Have a great evening on Wisconsin.
Thank you, Coach. So much to get to, but Stu, we were talking earlier, it's probably been a minute since you've been in the field house. Those boxing banners are down, remember?
Well, if I didn't remember, I was reminded when I walked in here today, and all deference to the National Championship volleyball program that exists here, but I have to say, I really miss those dirty, dusty, tattered boxing banners in the championships. I'm joking. But, you know, this building, boy, they've done an amazing job with it since I first walked in here in 1992. And at the same time, this place brings back some great memories and some stories about the players that played here at that time. So it's only fitting that we hold such an elegant evening here to celebrate Wisconsin basketball. Last thing, I just want to really sincerely thank Greg Gard for this brainchild of his and developing a sense of basketball community and family here at Wisconsin. And I'm just so sincerely honored that I was invited. And thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Bo, you are the most experienced in being in the Wisconsin Badgers basketball family, going back to, you alluded to it, with Coach Cofield, 1976, 77. I think some of those fellas are here with us tonight. Take us back in some of your memories of maybe some of those guys who are here tonight, what you remember of them as players here.
Well, what I remember about that crew was there are things that I can't talk about here. Oh, you mean talent-wise, or what do you? Here's what I remember. If you will turn around and take a look up at the top section, there was a buddy of mine who had the key to the gym here, and we would come in on Sundays and play pickup games. Andy North had the key, and he always let us in. He never rebounded, by the way. But we played some really good pickup games on Sundays. It lasted a long time. They actually made me pass a few times, which was difficult. But I remember playing here. But back up there, I brought my children with roller skates and a few nephews and nieces, and I let them roller skate around the outside, which actually, when I first came here, was a dirt track. They improved on that. We're playing. Next thing I know, I hear, "Dad, hey, Dad, hey, Dad." I look up, they are at the very top, and they're this big. She scolded me for not paying attention, but we were scared to death. So that's a memory that's away from basketball. But when I'm sitting here and I'm looking up there, first thing that came to my mind. The guys that were here, they were hungry. They were good guys. Big Ten Medal of Honor winner. We had one of the greatest all-around athletes in the state. Billy Pearson thinks I'm talking about him, but I'm not. You know, there were some guys here that wanted to play and were hard workers. Pete Bry, by the way, is Pete here?
Right, Pete?
Yeah,
There he is.
Pete, Medal of Honor, academic, everything. And I know Clyde Gaines is here, Bobby Jenkins. I'm purposely leaving Trinellick for last because he thinks he's the best player. Joe, you're here. You're still here, right? John Bailey. There's only a few more, so be patient. Did I see Newey? I saw Newey last. Who else? Clyde the Glide. Okay, well, Clyde, it's the lights coming off of our heads now. You know and I think that's it. But anyhow, and then we brought in a lot of guys in the next couple classes. But this place, when it was loud, I mentioned about playing the three blind mice. The band, as the officials made a few bad calls when Coach Palace was here. That's a famous story in the field house. But this place was very interesting spot. And all those guys made the best of it, all become very successful in their own line of work. And that's what's really neat. And what's really great about players is I'm not on social media, which you obviously told everybody.
I did. I let that out today.
But it's amazing when a guy needs something, he knows how to get a hold of me.
Which is all that matters.
Hey, Coach, could you call this school? Could you call? Yeah, I will. Anytime you guys need anything, just like the other coaches, we'll always take care of you. But a lot of memories. Wes Matthews' shot was right there to beat Magic Johnson. How many were here for that? Nice. Tyler, don't put your hand up. You weren't here before you were born. Anyhow, that was quite a moment. I think you've seen that on a Big Ten story. Wasn't that on something? Mm-hmm.
Yep.
But a lot of things. When you say being a veteran of this building, those are the things I think of.
Coach Bennett, earlier today you spoke very fondly of this building as well. You always embraced being here at the field house, didn't you?
First, I need to check. Senator Cole is not in the building, is he? Okay. My experience went back all the way to 1965 when I began coaching high school ball. And those are the days you brought your team down here for the state high school tournament. And the people in the community would take your kids in. It was a unique setup that the WIAA established. So I used to come down for every state tournament for, the 11 years that I coached high school basketball. And it became special to me. And then when I began collegiately at Stevens Point, I usually only came down for one game, and it was the Marquette, Wisconsin game. And I'm ashamed to tell you, but I have to do it. Al McGuire was one of my mentors. And I learned from him. I had a class he taught for 10 weeks in Appleton, Wisconsin. And I learned, I think no one was the master of tempo control like Al McGuire, nor was anyone as good at establishing roles on the floor. Basically saying, look, you just screen. I don't want you to look at the basket. Let's get this guy open. So the role establishment, tempo control has been never quite as good as Al did it. And that was the only time I ever pulled against Wisconsin because I loved the guy. I don't even know who was coaching him. I'm glad he's not here. So, then I spoke of having the privilege of coaching the last game of my high school career in this building. It was in the state tournament. I remember Kurt Nimfus tipping one in at the buzzer to beat us. Played for South Milwaukee. And then the next memory, my memories are not always good. I mean, you're looking at a guy who lost 4 times in 1 year to Michigan State. Who the hell could do that? I did it. But one of the more painful memories here, I thought of it, was the last game that we played here as the Badger. We played Northwestern. And we won the game, but that wasn't the point. Just a couple days before that, we lost arguably the most talented player I have ever dealt with. No names, no need to. Very gifted. Chose to leave. I've probably driven off more players because of the style. They're not crazy about it. And that happened in that case. And I've regretted that day ever since. But I also remember coming out at, where's the entrance? Coming out of the entrance and hearing boos and having a guy come right up to my face. I thought he wanted to hit me. And it was a very sad moment to spend that last day here. But that has been overcome by everything that has happened to me in this particular city and institution. I had 2 of my brothers who are graduates of Wisconsin and through med school. I attended graduate school here. There is no better place to be educated. I want to say there are 2 places that are great to play basketball, and this is one of them. I'll let you guess on the other one. I have said the greatest thrills of my professional career occurred here in seeing a group of guys with Roy Boone as one of the best. Charlie Wills is sitting here. When you get to 80, you don't try to name names because you forget them all. And that's where I am, thankfully, and you'll understand that. But I had one of the most wonderful group of young men, Mike Kelly, Andy Kowski, Mark Vershaw, Roy Boone, Charlie Wills, Maurice Linton, fabulous young men who bought into everything. And when I think of what I saw today at the luncheon and what I experienced here, may we never lose that loyalty. And we're heading in that direction in college basketball. The loyalty of kids wanting to stay together, wanting to be unified, wanting to achieve as a unit, and stay loyal to the people who gave them the first chance. And as I know about what I know about each of these coaches, they develop players. They don't use them. And we may lose that. And God willing, someone will have the sense to put an end to the nonsense at some point in time, and we'll get back to what amateur college basketball, college football was meant to be. So my memories are too many, and I feel like I'm too old to remember much specifics, but I remember having the best play-by-play man in the business, in Matt LePay.
Thank you. Wow. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Obviously, all of you coaches, you develop your own identity, your own way of messaging. But, Coach Gard, you obviously have done that, and highly successfully so. But how much do you, even to this day, you pick up the phone and you talk to Coach Ryan, Coach Bennett, other coaches. Obviously, you're getting, and Stu as well. How often can that happen here these days in your role as the head coach?
Well, I think the one thing with both of them, and I've talked to both of them many times, Coach Ryan and Coach Bennett, they both know that when things aren't going well, they sometimes leave me alone. And Bo has said that many times, hey, I figured if you really need something, you'll call. Or I'll get a text from Coach Bennett that, he'd watched the game. And I think having people that have walked in your shoes, and not only walked in your shoes, it's easy to walk in your shoes when you're climbing a ladder to cut down a net. But when they've walked in your shoes, when things aren't going well and you're going through some struggles and you're trying to find a way to help your guys get a little bit better, that's when I think these 2 guys specifically, and obviously with Coach Jackson, He's been busy with his current job and future job at the commissioner of the WCC, huh?
Yeah.
Can you get some balance in that league so Gonzaga doesn't win it every year?
I'm trying.
Try? All right. Well, you had one at the Final Four with San Diego State, so. But I think just having these type of people to rely on, to lean on, and I could call them at any time, text them, whatever. They've been extremely good friends. They're both like father figures to me, and just because I think the biggest thing is they've lived it. They've lived it, and I think when you've lived it, you understand it, and they understand what we go through as coaches, and it's obviously changed, as some of these guys have alluded to. It's changed more in the last 24 months than it has in the last 24 years. So,
Tell them how many times you tell me that
I'll
I
get
should
out
be
at the right
glad
time.
that I'm.
Well,
that
yeah.
I'm not
So,
coaching.
Coach Ryan, Coach called me right at the start of the NIT tournament, and he said, Gardo, I was on the Dan Dockage show yesterday, and Dan asked me, how long do you think you'd last in today's world in college coaching? And Bo said, Dan, I think I'd last 2 weeks. And as he was telling me this, I said, no, Coach, you're overestimating yourself. I'll give you 4 days. But, it's you adapt. And I think I got to point out, too, I've got a group of young men off to my left. I think all 14 of our 16 are here tonight. Carter Gilmore and Luke Hurdle are at Morgan Wallen concert Morgan Wallen concert in Milwaukee. But I've got a group of young men here. Coach Bennett he's a country singer.
Oh, okay. I don't know.
Coach Bennett talked about continuity and be able to keep a group together. And for this group to stay together, even though we've had, we took our lumps this year, this group is going to be fun to watch. Because I've already seen a week in the weight room of what they've done. And they had a lot of good experiences this year, even though the results weren't what we wanted. This group will be on a mission. And the fact that they've stayed together in today's world, when there's so much, scattering and going different roads, it's going to serve them well in the long run, not only for the next season or so, but also for what they're going to do the rest of their lives. So this group right here is hanging at these few tables. I got Dak dressed up tonight. Hey, all my current guys, stand up. Stand up, my current team.
That's so true. I tell you, just even as a broadcaster, it's been so refreshing with everything going on to see this group stay together the way it has. And yeah, I would echo what Coach Gard said. Look out for the Badgers in 2023, 2024. I know, Stu, you have a new gig, but I was reading a story from your hometown paper in Reading, I think it was last summer, where you talked about maybe at one point, probably not next week or next month, but at one point you maybe would like to coach again, if it's high school ball. But once a coach, always a coach. Is that something that still could be on your radar at some point down the road?
The answer is absolutely. In other words, throughout my career, and I made a choice a long time ago to pivot, away from coaching. And at the time, I felt that was the best decision for, my family, and I went a different path. But I'm asked all the time, well, two things happen, is that I'm very proud of the fact that people still call me coach, because I think once you coach, you're always a coach. And people always ask me, do you miss coaching? And I give them the same answer every time, and I say, only every day. So whenever I decide to stop working at least full-time, I'm going to coach somewhere. And I don't really care where it is. It could be high school, it could be junior high school, it could be junior college, men, women, or whatever. Because I think once you make a decision to coach, you make a decision to lead, and you make a decision to try to foster relationships and develop young people at a formidable time in their life. And it's events like these that it's never more present Like, I cannot tell you the amount of emotion that went through my body today in seeing on stage Chris Conger, Andy Kilbride, Mike Finley, Tracy Webster, Rashard Griffith, and Howard Moore. And the reason is not because what I did for them, but what they have done for one another. And that was a characteristic that I sensed when I coached them, their level of commitment and care to one another, but it's also an example of what they've become. And as a coach, there's not a better reward, and as I'm sure all three of these men would attest to, there's no better reward than that. So for that reason, you know, when I'm 75 years old, I'm going to go get me a team. So.
No, it's awesome. You guys, you remember that? Absolutely. Absolutely.
How about when
Hey, those guys, it was 30 years ago, they gathered together as teammates for the first time, and they picked right up on it. I'm sure you guys, whatever decade you played in, it's much the same. Stu, I did want to ask you about, you mentioned that team with Tracy and Michael, and getting into the NCAA tournament, 1994, the first time since 1947. That was the year you guys started 11-0, big time out of the box. Did you go into that season thinking, whether you said it publicly or not, thinking this team has the chops to get into the NCAA tournament?
I did not have that feeling that we would get into the tournament, not because I didn't think we could, but you just don't know. But what I did know going into my second year here was that we had a group of young men that were galvanized. So I thought we had a chance. But you can't get too ahead of yourself because that year the Big Ten was a monster. I mean, just a monster. I mean, the players were great. You know, Fab Five, Glenn Robinson, who poured 42 in this building after we had them down 13 with 6 minutes ago, but we won't talk about that.
Not that you remember.
Yeah, but it was a monster. But I knew that they were galvanized enough that they would play for one another, play together, and play as smart as they could. And when you have a team like that, you have a chance. That's all. You have a chance. But we snuck into the NCAA tournament. I gathered everybody at my house on a Sunday afternoon to watch the show, hoping that we got in the tournament. And we ate, everybody was nervous, and sure enough, they called our name, the University of Wisconsin, for the first time in 47 years, and it was bedlam. And at that point, you know, there's no greater joy that you feel for a bunch of guys that put their bodies on the line day in and day out for a crazy-ass coach. To get that sense of achievement, it was a great day.
And to get in and advance through the first round in a hard-fought game against a really tough Cincinnati team, big fella, Rashard Griffith. They were testing him. They sent him to the line a lot, and he answered the bell, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. He answered the bell with character. That's the confidence in character, which he's never short of.
Absolutely not. Coach Bennett, your first year with the Badgers, I mean, you jumped right in, kind of into the deep end of the pool right away, and going first to the Maui Invitational, where your first two games were against Villanova and UCLA. You played them both extremely tough, but that first year, take us through it. You made the postseason that first year. What do you remember about that? Well, we'll get to the Final Four in a bit, but that first team that came together and played really well.
Yes, they did. They really did. I remember I thought I had a shot to talk Rashard Griffith into staying. I made an appointment to visit with him. I gave him a little spiel when I met the players, took the job, same day I took the job. And I said, Rashard, I'd like to, if I could, spend some time with you and, you know, talk to you about maybe how we can work on some things and help you along and, you know, get you ready for the next step in your career. And I felt pretty good about it. And he said, we'll meet I think it was at the Howard Johnson. That's the place down there. I said, okay, I'll meet you at whatever time it was. And I went, and at the arranged time, and I felt I've got this all set up. And Richard comes walking down with all of his bags packed. He said, I'm going home. And I thought, I never got a chance to make my recruiting pitch, and of course never got a chance to coach Richard Griffith. But the rest of those guys, we had some walk-ons. Gosh, they had just backbone. And there are guys involved in this luncheon today, so many of them, just strong people. And, you know, I've been in so many rebuilding situations, even at the high school level and then at Point and Green Bay, and I don't know if that was the case here, but you have to have, I've discovered something, and I've heard my son talk about it. When you start a program, you have to have people you can lose with. And we did our share of losing, but the growth that occurs if you can look in the mirror and say, we lost, we were beaten, or we lost. There's a big difference between being beaten and losing. And those kids that had an incredible character that has been evidenced in all the work they've done in the setting that we face today, one of the greatest, most emotional experiences I've had in many, many years. And I will always be thankful for that first year. I mean, we lost a lot of kids by injury, our best players, and yet they hung together. And that was the first step, and it enabled me to do what I found you have to do when you face what you think is a rebuilding circumstance. You have to work that first year and bring in a very big recruiting class. And we were able to do that because of that group. And I think we brought 5 guys in who did quite well. I remember that year, it really was an enjoyable year, except for some personal circumstances that occurred that year in my family. As I said today, I've been out east a lot. It's not like it out there, in my opinion, which is half the time wrong, but like here. This is one of the greatest circumstances, and perhaps other Big Ten schools have that same feeling. It's just different. Just seeing the folks, and we've lived in one place now for 15 years after 15 moves. And my wife Ann and I have been married 60 years. We were high school sweethearts. At least she was mine. I don't know if I was hers, but and I was born and raised in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but there's just nothing like this. When I see these kids, when I saw what happened today, and I watch Badger games. I don't watch much basketball anymore. I can't even watch my son's games, but it's what a thing you have here. What a marvelous setting. There's none better. So I'm thankful for having been a little part of that.
Well said. Part of the beauty of here as well is that there have been so many teams who have defied the experts' preseason prognostications, and they've all had teams that have far surpassed what supposedly those in the know think will unfold. And with that, Bo, your first team here, I think a lot of the pundits wondered, there were injuries, and Latrell Fleming had to step away from basketball himself because of a heart condition, wondering, wow, is this team going to win 9-10 games? You're low on numbers, and the run of titles began. That first season, there were, Coach Bennett said you're going to take a few bumps, or as you would say too, but some guys you lose with, and then everything changed. Take us through that first year where we didn't know what kind of season it was going to be, and then lo and behold, you're holding up a nice shiny trophy to the Big Ten champions.
Well, first of all, you have to be thankful for the players who were still here. We lost. Greg talked about adversity this year and how he had never seen that kind of adversity before. I looked at Kelly and I said, should I call him up and tell him about the first year we were here? Latrell Fleming, cardiomyopathy. Andreas Helmick, ACL. 2 scholarships lost to the shoebox. We had 7 scholarship players. The best part of it was the guys who were returning knew basketball under Coach Bennett and Coach Soderberg and the other coaches that were on the staff. So they fit into what we wanted to do when we took over. And a red shirt like Mike Wilkinson, you don't get those every day. And what happened was they believed in themselves to the point where I actually got Kirk Penny to post up, Coach. We guarded him at UWM and I think held him to two baskets because he would never put the ball on the floor. No shot fake, Reef, no shot fake. Kirk played extremely well that first year. And then that skinny guard from Wauwatosa, was it? Can't even remember the high school. But I do remember Devin and his parents coming in my office. I mean, since we're talking about what we remember and what makes people special. So Devin and his folks come in, and we sit down, and I got to re-recruit Devin Harris because his AAU coach told him, you don't want to play for that guy. He blah, 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 blah. So I talked to the parents, answered their questions. Where do you see my son playing? Well, I'll tell you what. I saw his instincts, his point guard instincts. He's a point guard. If he's going to make it later on, which I've never talked to one recruit about the next level. I've never mentioned the NBA, and my assistants can tell you what are you going to do here at Wisconsin? So I said, well, I think Devin will be a really good point guard in the Big Ten. Latrell Fleming was rated higher, but the cardiomyopathy never got to play. And we also had, who's the big fella that had some issues? Julian Schwartz decided not to play after one day on the Hill. I could not understand that. Everybody loves the Hill. And so we have 7 scholarships, and we're 1-5 or 2-5, whatever it was. And it did not look good. I came home, said to Kel, okay, the contract was 5 years, $300,000 a year because they gave me what Dick was making. So I said, Kel, they can do whatever they want to do. We got 4 more years of $300,000. You want to fire me? Go ahead. That's what you said one time to me. So anyhow, we go through the season, get a few upsets, and then they turned into what the second half of the season, they weren't upsets. And those guys had a chance to play in a game for 40 minutes for the Big Ten championship, a piece of it. Still the championship. I don't care what anybody's. I don't care if 9 teams tied for first. It was first. And how proud those guys were. I forgot to mention Charlie Wills was another one of those guys that was back. But solid defenders, knew how to play the game because of the coaches they had. So I walked into a pretty good situation, and everybody told me, That's the worst coaching job in the Big Ten. Why would you take that? I'm like, here's the reason. We lost when I coached here from 76 to 84. When I say we lost, gained a lot of friends, met a lot of good people, our record. And if you've ever been an athlete that never lost a team sport, was never on a losing team, and to get a chance to go back, is there anything sweeter than that? So here was the opportunity. The gentleman that made it happen, it's so vivid in my memory when we beat Michigan and the excitement from Trevon Davis jumping up on the rim. He was told to me, I said, all right, let's look at the roster. Who do we have coming back? Robbie Jeter, Greg and I, Saul Phillips, Duffy Conroy were looking at and they said, well, that Davis kid, coach, he's a turnover waiting to happen. Oh, really? Yeah, okay. You know, so we get in our drills. Trevon Davis had an unbelievable freshman year, so I played Devin at the 3. Back to the conversation. I say to his parents, that's what I think. They say that the AAU coach, who we all love, said, no, he's going to make it in the NBA as a 2-man, as a shooter. I said, okay, that's his opinion. So we go on to discuss a few other things. They're driving home, and this is what Devin tells me. The parents say, well, what are you going to do? You still going to go to Wisconsin? He tells me, and he says, of course. And they said, well, why? After what he said, he told me not what I wanted to hear. He didn't say, like, this is, what he said was how he envisioned me in the game and what he saw. And I can play for a coach like that. I can play for a coach that didn't tell me and what you, as my parents, wanted to hear. It was done the way that Devin liked it, and he wasn't a bad player, Dick, when you recruited him, right? You and Brad and everybody. He was pretty good. But anyhow, the first year, and then they stand over there on the table, and we get the trophy, and that's nice. We don't coach for the trophy, but it was in addition to the past teams and past things that have happened around here. And it was awfully nice to have people talking more Wisconsin basketball. They were talking in 2000, of course. You're talking when Stu takes them to the NCAA tournament, Steve to the NIT. I mean, whatever it is, they're talking Wisconsin basketball. So that first year, as a result of having some pretty solid returnees and adding the new players, as shorthanded as we were, that team was really special.
And I always thought, too, one of the really entertaining aspects of those first couple of years was watching Tony Bennett and Rob Jeter, Coach Tony, Coach Rob, participate in the scrimmages, and they're yelling at Otto for, the foul calls. Coach Gard, how many times did you have to step in and be the role of the cooler, to try to keep those two coaches down a little bit? Because, like, once a coach, always a coach, once a player, always a player. They did not have an off switch, did they?
No, they didn't.
Speaking of Otto, though, this is the 125th. If you want to know about the first one, we'll get you Otto's number here. Now, seeing as we won't be around for the 150th.
No, I don't think so.
What'd you say? Speak for yourself. So are you going to do it 25 years? Are you going to wait that far?
I might not be around for 150 either. So,
Matt,
you were asking about Rob
Jeter
Jeter and Tony Bennett in practice.
Yes.
Yeah, so I got to coach them, and as they put them on the scout team, as Bo mentioned, we were shorthanded. Offense was never a problem. It was always Tony's hamstring that bothered him when it was time to play defense. He never wanted to play. He'd always grab his hamstring. I was like, you just made 4 step-back jumpers from 30 feet. Why can't you go to the other end? And there'd be a little, we'd competitively argue with each other a little bit, but no, those two were obviously the scout team MVPs that year.
They
And,
were the best players.
we were trying to sneak them in, put
anybody out
put some wigs on them and get them in the games. But yeah, it was always offense. The guys that are here know scout team, you have a green light. There's no bad shot. Defense is optional. For those two guys, offense was good, defense was optional.
Coach Gard didn't talk to me for a year because I never put him on the scout squad. I said, Greg, you're much too valuable with the other
There you
X's
go.
and O's and everything.
There you go.
We're not going to put you out there.
Dick, did you want to say something? You were starting to chime in?
When Bo mentioned earning $300,000 a year, which was what I made, I was just thinking, if Rashard Griffith and Michael Finley came out today, they'd make more than that. If they were still playing high school or college basketball, they'd be making more than that. It's incredible. But it was enough. It was enough.
Yeah.
Well worth it.
Coach Gard, we talk about teams that play beyond the so-called experts' expectation. We go all the way back to 2022, preseason pick number 10, wins a Big Ten championship. But when you took over in the transition, in the Big Ten was 1-4, that start. And then everything changed. I know it wasn't that long ago, but it's worth reminding what happened, what started to click that propelled you guys into a high Big Ten finish and a run to the Sweet 16 that season.
Yeah, I think anytime, we talked earlier today about Howard coming back and that being able to sit in that position. And I know we got Gary Close here somewhere. I saw him earlier. Gary on the staff and other coaches. Yes. And Lamont Paris, who's is down in South Carolina now, but it's a group that fortunately they got a great message from our staff. And when things could have went awry, as you mentioned, we were 7-5 when Coach decided to head to Palm Springs to golf, and then we kind of sputtered through the 1-4 start. But anytime they look back at the staff, they got the same message. And I think trying to keep everybody on the path, and we had to get better. We had lost quite a few good players from the year before. Guys like Josh Gosser and Dewey Dukin, some guy named Decker and some guy named Kaminsky. Went on. So this group had to develop an identity, and having a staff in place that was able to show them that way, but then how they were able to take ownership of the group. And we had a younger group with Nigel and Bronson. Showalter had to step forward and had to assume more of a leadership role. And fortunately for all of us, they found a way.
They did.
Greg, we should have been in the Elite Eight that year. We'll talk about that.
Don't worry about it.
We'll do one more lap here because we've talked about assistant coaches. And Stu, I knew this, but I was glancing back. I mean, Sean Miller, was he restricted earnings back in those days? He was on the staff. Stan Van Gundy, Tim Buckley. I mean, you had some enormously talented coaches on your staff, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I mean, Sean Miller, for those of you that may not remember, spent a season with us. And I hired him 3 days after his college graduation as a graduate assistant, is what they called him at that time. And, got a chance to work with Tim Buckley, who I thought was an extremely talented coach, and Stan Van Gundy, who was actually recommended to me as an assistant by his brother, Jeff Van Gundy. After I asked Jeff for some recommendations of potential assistants, and at the end of the call, he goes, "Hey, listen, my brother's a Division II coach at the University of Massachusetts Lowell. Just have a conversation with him." And I had a conversation with him and hired him on the spot. So yeah, we were fortunate, and also on our staff was a guy by the name of Brian Hecker.
Yes, sir.
And Brian was, I guess in today's terms, an administrative person who is now on his 26th year at the Miami Heat. So I was very fortunate. And, you talk about messaging of assistants to players. They were a good buffer for me, as Andy can attest to. because it was a little bit of good cop, bad cop, and it worked, fortunately for us, but very grateful. I think a head coach is only as good as his players and his assistants.
Yeah, it was a remarkable staff, and I would tell you that Brian Anderson, good friend of mine, you all know BA with the Brewers and his baseball and his basketball. He works with Stan a lot, and he raves about Stan, his knowledge and how he's developed as a broadcaster. Stan would tell you now he's stealing money. I hope he's stealing for a long time because he's one of the great guys you'll ever meet, and it's really fun to see him have success. We cannot end this, though, without a little Final Four talk. And it's cool that we have multiple Final Four runs. Let's start, Coach Bennett, with your 2000 team. Now, remember that season, you're getting into February, in the mid-February, and it was still, you had some big wins, but it was, gaining traction was still a work in progress. Take us through that in what really jump-started that year's team to the magical run it had getting to the Final Four.
Well, we weren't setting the world on fire, that's for sure. Probably I defended our best offensive players better than anybody on the other team. I've been accused of that by a number of players. They say, well, who's the hardest guy to score against? They said, Coach Bennett, with his system. And I recall a circumstance, though. I remember they had a steel meter among the student body in the end zone. And Mike Kelly, who had been the defensive player of the year in the Big Ten the year before, and he was approaching an all-time steal record. And I accused him of going for steals rather than playing position. And that was a mortal sin, to suggest that. And I remember his father politely challenged me on that point, and it made the point that unless we're connected, you can be the best defender in the world, or we can want it more than anyone. We can be highly motivated, but to play the kind of defense we want, we have to be connected. We just have to. And there was a moment where it just turned. And of course, we had some tough games because we ended with, I'll not forget, our last game at home in the field house was against Indiana. Turned out to be Bob Knight's last game in the Big Ten, and mine too, for that matter. But we were something like, if I'm not mistaken, we were as much as 14 down in the second half. And we had Dwayne, first and last name, just caught fire. And we won the game, which essentially got us into a good spot in the tournament, and we had to beat Purdue. We beat Purdue, I think, 3 times that year to offset losing to Michigan State 4 times. But that team came together in such a way that I've had few teams come together like that. And Coach Knight, if you remember, I think somebody got in a fight on the scoreboard. Maybe
Yeah, Otto had to beat up
Otto,
somebody.
was that
Beat up
Otto?
Indiana's
God
SID.
bless Otto,
Yeah.
And Coach Knight, I think Coach Knight broke his clipboard, and I've talked about that with him. I also want to say something about Bob Knight. As much as Al McGuire, you get old, you think of these things, but as much as Al McGuire taught tempo control and role playing, Bob Knight is the master of modern day basketball. His mind was so far ahead in terms of how the game was to be played. And I think so much has developed from his theories. Of course, Coach Wooden was the most successful coach in history, but so many of us, I know Bo loved Coach Bob in terms of his theories, but he was a guy that spoke and just pulled a thought from your mind. And probably one of my greatest privileges was being able to coach against him for 5 years. And one last funny story, when he was coaching at Texas Tech, And I was coaching out at Washington State in an effort to get Tony the head job, which he did get. But Coach Knight and I were sitting together in Las Vegas and watching that affair at the end of the summer, you know. And he said to me, listen, I've got a proposition for you. He said, I would like to take your son Tony as my assistant for a year, and you take Pat as your assistant, his son. And I got home and I said to Tone, Coach Knight would like to have you as an assistant, and I'd have Pat. Tony looked at me, he says, no way. No way. You had to know how hard Coach Knight was on his assistants. But yes, that particular group came together, often as they do, at a difficult time, and rallied from that point on.
Every team is unique. You can't compare the 23 Badgers to the 18 Badgers or so on and so forth. But one common thread that even someone in my role can see with the 2000 Badgers and the 14 and 15 Badgers is how much damn fun they had along the way. They took it all in. I mean, and the New York Times comes in and does a story on Bo's guys because got to play school here. And they were studying in the midst of the run to the Final Four. And Bo, take us back, because we got some guys in the room who were, to say the least, instrumental. I mean, you coached nothing but NCAA tournament teams. But those 14 and 15 teams, beyond the obvious of, as you would say, being on the left-hand side in those runs, what do you remember most about how those guys went about their business? And Greg, you feel free as well to chime in.
Well, first of all, I think I missed some guys on the other. This is not to like showcase or to put people above somebody else. But can all the guys that played in either 14 or 15 or both please stand up so we can see who the heck's here? I didn't get a chance to meet everybody. So everybody that's here to...
The two retired guys over here.
That's why I did it. Come on, you know me better than that. It was so exciting. I was telling Coach Bennett earlier, because I talked to some of your players, like, what did you do at the Final Four, like practices? And it had changed so much from when you guys were there. And in 14, 15, all the interviews, all the people, and the games, the video games, the room, it was workout rooms. Just to get into that Jury Dome in 14 and leave everybody else behind and just coach basketball was such a relief, because it is a circus. It's an absolute circus for the players and the coaches. And I'm not complaining, we would do it every year, right, if you could, Greg. And in case we get back there again, be ready for all that stuff. But anyhow, that group in 14, we snuck up on people. There's no question. And the way they gelled and the way we were playing down the end, do me a favor and tell Sean Miller I was glad that we got to play them to go to the Final Four. Do you know what Sean Miller did when he was 9 years old?
Yeah, he was on Johnny Carson.
Yeah.
No, he wasn't. He was on Johnny Carson. I flew him in from Pittsburgh. Dad, the high school coach, Coach Miller. Flew him in here, and I called it Round Ball for Youth Night. And had the players do a scrimmage, right, guys? He did a scrimmage, and we had Crazy George. He spins 8 balls at the same time, and Tanya Crevier, gender equity, the best women's spinner. And we had them put on, and we brought in Sean Miller at 9 years old. One of my assistants, his wife, made a Superman's outfit for him. I have the only copy. I have the only copy that I changed from reel to reel to, I'm real modern. It's a DVD. No, it's not a DVD. It's before DVDs. What level is that?
VHS.
VHS. It's on VHS. And so anyhow, Sean Miller put on a show here before he was Pittsburgh's point guard and all. But anyhow, so we're playing Arizona, and we mentioned about things going on. We had an earthquake. How many remember that?
Right. Yep.
And I'm on the 19th floor. Kel, what floor are we on? 19th floor. And all of a sudden, I hadn't even had a drink. And I thought I had 10 because everything started moving. And then that's when they did the story on the guys doing homework, doing study. And they're like, the other teams aren't doing that. Hey, that's the other teams. We do what we do. So those guys embraced that, and being in Anaheim and winning those 2 games and then getting to go, for me personally, everybody has their own stories. My dad had passed away. We had gone to 38 straight Final Fours together because it's our convention. And he kept telling people, my boy's going to get his team there one of these days. He's going to get his team there one of these days. And that guy did that interview with me after the game. I had all I could handle just to not fall to the ground. But I do really feel badly about the fact that he never got a chance to see. You got a chance to see Tony.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, how exciting is that? But after all those years, and he didn't get a chance, and my mom had passed away the year before. So for me, that was really special in that hopefully he was with us in some manner, somewhere safe. And the looks on their faces, the players, the Oregon game in Milwaukee, every worker there said that building has never moved like that for a Bucks game, for any game when we made that comeback on Oregon. Now, they might have been trying to make me feel good.
Yeah.
And I felt good after the game. I remember Ben begging to go back in the game about 10 times. He didn't like being subbed for. So I finally put him in, and he made a shot, which spearheaded the comeback. But how do you ever, in something like this, we'd be here for 2 weeks to talk about the experiences and all that, but how about for the students here? How about for the diehard fans that have been buying season tickets to have another chance to go to the Final Four and have it be in Indianapolis?
Yeah.
So wasn't yours in Indianapolis?
Yep.
So that was kind of interesting. So that worked out pretty well.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I do remember in the Oregon game. I think Bo, you got teed up in that game. Coach Gard, how many tees did you save him that he was in that game? I know you only have one yourself. I can't even remember it. But how many do you think you saved with Bo? Maybe kind of cooling him off a little bit.
Yeah, man. I was the holdback guy. Like, let him go just far enough, and then hold him back.
There's a coach in the Big Ten that pays 2 guys to make it look like they're holding back this coach who's fiery and turns red and does, you don't know who I'm talking about. And they do it on purpose. And he goes just so far, and then they pull him back. How come you don't pay 2 guys to do that?
Well, I told this group, we were sitting doing pictures this afternoon at the Howard Moore event, and I said, there is one thing that I'm in first place amongst all 4 of us up here on. I've had the least amount of F-bombs caught on camera of any head coach here. The rest of these guys are way ahead of me.
That is true. I believe that is true. To wrap this, and Greg, again, we go back to you, and Coach Jackson mentioned that this whole thing is your baby, and this has been such an incredible weekend, as powerful a lunch today as I think we've ever been at. But to celebrate all these eras, to have everybody, we talk about specific teams, but everyone who wore a Wisconsin uniform, to all the guys in here today. I mean, for you to see this actually come to life, just put a wrap on it and what it means to you to have a weekend like this.
Well, I've always tried to take the approach, it's not about me. And, you know, going back, we talked about Coach Yoder, the last living head coach that's still with us all the way, you know, through the current group of guys. But it's about the players. And there's two groups, one individual I want to make sure I point out here, or a few thank yous before we go.
Yep.
But you saw the head coaches all got presented with red blazers as they came out. So they were designed with inside is a picture of the Kohl Center, the field house, and the red gym inside. The whole lining is done. It has their name in it. It has the years that they've coached here. Okay. And Steve Walker, I know he's here somewhere. Where's Steve? Steve is our, thank you, Steve. These are awesome. And then the other thing I want to do, Matt, with all the former players that are here and staff, coaches that have joined us, I know some are, Josh mentioned a lot of former players. The younger ones are still playing, but former players, coaches, stand up.
Come on. Hey. All right, guys.
Because really, we get to stand up here and talk, but it's really about you guys. So thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Coach Jackson, Coach Bennett, Coach Ryan, Coach Gard. It's a remarkable night. It's great to have you all here. Thank you all. On Wisconsin. Enjoy the rest of the evening.
Thank you, Coach. Thank you.
Thank you.